Hi, I'm Peter Jones, Chartered Surveyor, author and property investor. I've had a question in from James. Now, James isn't his real name, but I'm just going to sort of protect his identity in case he doesn't want me to share his personal details. But James is on short-term contracts. He's an IT consultant, and although he gets regular work, the contracts are always of a relatively short duration. And this has meant that he hasn't been able to buy his own home. But he does want to build a buy-to-let portfolio, and he's asked me for any tips that I can give. Well, the very first thing is that I did a video recently for Michael, who had a very similar situation. He hadn't, I was assuming, been able to buy his own home, and in that video I explained that many buy-to-let lenders require you to own your own home before they will lend to you. Now, actually, the reality is, not all lenders, but there is a handful of lenders, but it's literally only a handful of lenders who will consider lending if you don't own your own home. So I'd certainly be talking to a mortgage broker to find out what finance is available. But I think the key thing is probably to think about what strategies would actually work around this, and to think about whether James should actually be buying his first home in the first instance. The reality is that if you can buy your home, I would do that. I would probably do that in preference to buying buy-to-lets, to be honest, James, and I will tell you why. The first reason is that if you buy your own home, you're going to get a much better mortgage deal. A typical buy-to-let loan will give you a 75% loan to value, whereas a typical sort of residential mortgage for an owner-occupier, first-time buyer, is around about 90%, but it could even be 95%, which means that you could save, you not only need to save a relatively small amount. Now, I know that you've had some trouble in the past because your contracts are too short to be able to get a normal residential mortgage, but what I would say is I'd probably talk to different mortgage brokers, because in my experience you can usually find the finance somewhere. Somebody would usually lend it to you, and it usually comes down to terms. It might be slightly more expensive, but there's probably a lender out there who will lend to you. But let's assume that you can't buy your own home and that you want to get into buying buy-to-lets. Well, because you're on short-term contracts, you haven't told me how much you actually earn, and it could be that you earn enough to go past the £25,000 qualification criteria, which many buy-to-let lenders have, in which case, again, I'd be talking to a good broker, because the broker will be able to take you to the lenders who will lend to you, even if you don't own your own home. But let's assume that that doesn't work. Let's assume that because of your circumstances there aren't any buy-to-let lenders who will lend to you. What can you do? Well, there's a number of things that you can do. The first is that you can look at some of the no money down strategies, like using options, instalment contracts and so forth. You could even use strategies which don't require any capital, such as rent to rent, for example. That could be a good way forward. You could consider deal sourcing, deal packaging, finding deals and then selling the deals on for a fee and saving the fees and using that to build your capital. Or you could use private finance, and that private finance, if I was wanting to build my portfolio and I had literally no money and no chance of borrowing conventional funds, I'd definitely be thinking about private finance, finding individuals who want to get into property but perhaps they don't have the time, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the confidence, they don't have the experience, and I would be finding deals, taking the deals to people who've got the money and trying to do some kind of agreement with them, a JV agreement, where either they pay you for finding the deals, that can be okay, but even better is that you become part of the deal, either perhaps sharing 50-50 ownership, sharing the rent 50-50, or even better is finding somebody who just wants to earn money on their money. There's lots of people out there who are earning like 0.5% or less even in the bank, and you can offer them a very decent return. You can offer them 10 times that amount and they'll think they're getting an absolute bargain in terms of the return they're making on their money, and they could just give you a straight loan to be able to go out and buy properties, and they could 100% finance your property purchases. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can do it, James. This is a very short video, or 2-minute video, so I can't go into all the ins and outs. But the point is, yes, you can do it. You just need to sit down and think carefully, how can you do this? Particularly think about who do you know who might want to invest in you as an investor and who might want to make a decent return either from lending you the money or make a decent return potentially from investing with you. By the way, I should say, for those who are watching, if you think about taking somebody on as a sort of 50-50 equity partner, there are rules around that. You need to make sure that they're high net worth or sophisticated investors, which is one reason why using just a straight loan is a much better, much safer, much cleaner, less complicated way of financing your properties.
Well, I hope you found that informative and inspirational. And if you want help in property, please do come over to my website, www.thepropertyteacher.co.uk. Loads of great resources there, including my blog. There's loads of free videos, loads of great articles. There's free reports to download, including Learning with Peter, where you'll be able to access resources like my video courses, like my ebooks, including my home study course, the Successful Property Investors Strategy Workshop, which I've literally sold thousands of copies of, which takes you through how I started in property, literally with none of my own money, but how I was able to build a portfolio of £2 million worth of property in just 4 years. I'll show you everything that I did right so that you can do the same, and I'll show you everything that I did wrong. I'll tell you about all of my mistakes so that you can avoid them, so that you can progress in property far more quickly than me. Until next time, here's to successful property investing.